guys, and welcome back to another episode of Business Unboxed. Again with your host Kelly and co-host
Corey.
So, as you would have seen from the title of this episode, we're going to dive a little bit into work-life balance. So obviously I'll be able to come at this topic from more of an employee perspective and Corey from more of an entrepreneur, business owner perspective. And essentially we're just going to kind of discuss if it can be a reality, if you can find work-life balance, if it's this myth and it's something that everybody's striving towards that can't actually exist, or we're just going to have a bit of a casual discussion on the topic. So I guess if I kick it off, for me, work-life balance means you have enough time inside work to obviously make the money you need to make to sacrifice, to have enough for your life and be able to get your work done. And then you have enough time outside of that commitment to then do what you want to do in your personal life. So whether that's you've got kids, you've got pets, you've just got a few hobbies, you've got enough time to kind of have both of those and feel satisfied and have enough time away from work to relax and do all that kind of thing. So to me, that's what work-life balance is. What does it mean for you, Corey?
I guess the same. I guess it's just being able to do both things in harmony without feeling like you don't have enough time for one or the other. So you can live life comfortably knowing that you can go to work or do what you do, and you have enough time to do it and do it well, and then you can come home or live the rest of your life and you have enough time that you feel like you can do that well. So you have time to rest and relax, spend time with friends and family, go on holidays, have experiences, and that one isn't maybe pulling at you more than the other.
Yeah. So I guess from an employee's perspective, obviously you guys know what I think it is and how I might manage it. Now obviously being an employee, you can't essentially decide how many hours you work. Yes, you can get a part-time job if you want to balance your work and life priorities a bit more or whatever. But for me, like most full-time jobs in New Zealand are 40 hours a week at least. So normally most contracts, if it's full-time work, will be 40 hours and then any additional hours that are required. In Australia, I believe it's actually only 38 hours is the norm for full-time. And then obviously other countries, I'm unsure what the normal is. But I know obviously there's a few countries out there that are trialing the whole four-day work week. So obviously that's a reduction in hours to give people a bit more work-life balance, if you want to call it that. For me, obviously, I work Monday to Friday, the standard, not 8 to 5, but I work slightly more earlier in the morning and I can finish a little bit earlier, but it's still the 40 hours and then any additional hours you might need for when there's certain urgent projects, that kind of thing. So I don't get to choose my hours. I can't say like, oh, I'm just going to take a Friday off without having to take, leave or whatever. Like I can't just say I've done all my work and I can have the rest of the week off. So it's a little bit harder, and I do find that I like the idea of a 4-day work week. I have suggested it before to an employer. There's obviously a lot that would have to go into it to make it work. But sometimes, I don't know about you guys listening or not, but for me personally, only having 2 days in the weekend, sometimes when you've got a lot of things on, you're like, where'd those 2 days go? There's not enough time to actually relax in a weekend and actually de-stress from a stressful week, because you've got chores and you might have kids and pets that you have to do things with. You might want to catch up with friends. You might have to see family. And then by the time you've done all of that kind of stuff, the weekend is over and then you've got to start the week again. So I feel like having that extra day off to me would help my work-life balance. But in saying that, you've just got to prioritise the mindset. If you do some days at home, for instance, might be a little bit harder because you're working in the same environment that you live in and you want your personal life in. So for me at the moment, I am working fully in the office, so it's quite easy for me to tick off. But for Corey, for instance, you must work, is it most days from home? So how do you
Hmm.
manage that mindset of living and working in your home environment, and how do you know when to like clock on and off?
Yeah, I thought I'd just also mention that also if you're an employee, sometimes it can be, even though you may not feel like it's balanced, there is probably for most employees, I assume, some kind of structure because you
Mm-hmm.
kind of have to, most employees kind of clock on and clock off at certain times, right? Whereas I think, at least for me, being a business owner, um, there is no strict clock on and clock off. So even though I might work 40 hours in a week, it's not like I, start at a certain time and end at a certain time. So it possibly feels for some business owners a little bit harder to find the balance, if we're going to call it that,
Mm.
uh, compared to an employee. But having said that, it gives me personally lots of freedom. So I work in my home office here. I don't necessarily feel like I have to sit in here for a certain amount of hours every day. I tend to work often on weekends, work late nights. I take my laptop to bed or to the couch, and I don't have a problem with that. It is what works for me. I tend to have a pretty structured day. So in my calendar, I have a structured. I can't remember how many. I always try and finish half day Friday. So I tend to work slightly longer days to compensate. And yeah, one of the reasons I left my job was to have the flexibility. So I love having the flexibility. Our mother's coming up here at the end of the week, and so I'm able to take a day and a half off to spend time with her. And I can work a few extra hours than Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to kind of compensate for that, and it doesn't really worry me that much. So yeah, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, like you obviously sound like you've got it kind of under control where you are able
Mm,
to like manage that clock in, clock off. I guess you've got like a separate room that you do most of your work in, but
yeah.
you can move around and it doesn't bother you. But I think what we hear from most other business owners and entrepreneurs is it feels like they're working 24/7. Like there's that joke online where it's like, oh, I want to leave the 9 to 5, but then I end up working 24/7 because
Mm-hmm.
you're a business owner.
Yep.
So your brain's always on. But I guess it's a matter of, like you said, you have a really structured calendar and you like to finish half day Friday, but if that means you need to work extra, then that's just something you know you have to do. So maybe it's if you want a better work life balance and you are a business owner, trying to find and plan out your days so you actually know what you need to achieve and then you don't feel like you're constantly thinking about what you need to do because you've written it down on paper, you know what you've got to do. If you're ahead of it, maybe you can take some extra time off, maybe you can be a bit more flexible. But if you've got a lot on, maybe you just know that that week isn't going to be as balanced as you want to say, and
Mm,
it's more work for that one week. I mean, balance is, you could, if you want it to call it even, but it's never going to be even. But I guess
yeah.
as long as you are balancing it overall and you're not working too hard, then I guess you've got some sort of a balance if you can kind of manage what you need to do outside of work.
Yeah. So a couple of points there. So one of the things that I think, if people want to quit their job and work for themselves, is the idea, and I assume this is the case for most business owners that are truly passionate about what they do, is that your business becomes your life. At
Mm.
least it is for me and any other business owner I know. Um, like you just don't stop thinking about it. I think about it day and night all the time, never off. So, when I go on holiday, um, if I've got a big holiday, I don't take my laptop and I can usually partly switch off. But it's always in the back of your mind about, what's going to happen tomorrow. I need to do this, I need to do that. And so I think that partly contributes to the idea that there's not much of a work life balance, or you feel like you're working more than you are because you're constantly thinking about it. Uh, so you just have to find what works for you is the biggest thing, really. You have to find ways for you to switch off if you have to switch off. For me, that's playing Xbox, that's going out, doing something, watching a movie. That's my switch off thing, and I don't think about work when I do those things. If I'm going around visiting people or at a cafe doing networking, because it's kind of very closely linked to working, I'm like, oh, I'm in work mode. I'm thinking about work from when I get up to when I go to bed because I know my day is full of that kind of those kind of tasks and meetings. The other thing you mentioned is that like when we're talking about balance, right, or finding what works for you and managing both things, it doesn't have to be on a weekly basis just because that's what you do a 40-hour week. You don't have to try and find balance in a week. You find balance in a year, right, or in months, or in a day. So for me, sometimes I'm super busy. Like the start of this year's been super busy for me personally. I'm super busy with work. We have a puppy that I have to look after during the day. And so that's kind of thrown the first quarter or the last quarter of the financial year out for me personally. But, also last year I went on a throwback holiday to Australia. So what I'm getting at is that there's going to be certain weeks and certain months of the year that you're super busy, things feel really crazy, you're tired, you're run down. But then there'll be other times of the year, hopefully, when it's not going to be busy. And, you can work a day less if you work for yourself and take extra time out, or you take an extended holiday to kind of make up for it. So it's a balance, but it doesn't have to be within a week that you're working. It's kind of look at the bigger picture of the whole year. If you're on all the time and you're getting run down and you're not finding enough time for yourself outside of work, and you're doing that for months and months, then you start to get burnout, and then that's when it doesn't work. But if you can kind of, there'll be peaks and troughs throughout the year of business, and so as long as you can kind of maintain everything and recover, and yeah, I think it's comfortable for me anyway.
So you kind of raise a good point about it not necessarily being like 2 a week. Like the balance doesn't have to be over a week; it can be over a longer period of time. So, an example that I have, and if you've been a listener of the podcast for a while, you might have known that obviously I studied for a majority of the time actually that I've done this podcast. And so while I was studying, I was working full time. At the start of my degree study, we actually had the business that we've kind of touched on briefly a couple of times that ended up didn't working out. And so I didn't have a lot of balance. I mean, work to personal life. My personal life was then consumed by study and also helping run a business. And then when I finished certain study and I got out of that business, I then went and did even heavier lots of study. And so I really didn't have a lot of balance mentally and to de-stress, because even though I had the same work and life like separation of hours, the life portion of my life was not lifing at that point. It was surviving to get me through. And so that was 2 years of extreme like stress and like always having something in the back of my mind outside of work. And so what I've done to compensate for that is the last year of my life I have taken a bit easier, because I was in this and people refer to it as seasons. So you might be in like a hustle season, or you might be in a relaxation, like a recovering season. I definitely was burnt out back then, but I am now taking the time to change what season I was in and to actually relax. And last year I essentially did nothing in my personal life because I felt like I needed to find that balance back of having nothing going on in my personal life and having work be work. And so yeah, I definitely feel like you need to look at it from a bigger perspective than thinking I need a certain number of hours per week that I'm spending on my life or work or whatever, and have a look at it as, if you want to grow your business, there may be a certain element of more heavily work-wise and business-wise for a certain period of time before you can find more of that balance and bring in more of that relaxing life aspect.
The other thing too to consider, and maybe it's a little bit harder to do this if you're an employee, but most people have certain times of day work better. So some people focus better in the morning, some people focus better in the afternoon, late at night, early in the morning. And so, for me, it changes all the time what's going on. But for me to sit in bed late at night to go through some emails or to finish some easy design stuff off is quite nice. It's quite relaxing. And then it
Mm.
makes me in the morning not to have to do that. So, when you're thinking about working, if you work for yourself, you have the ability around when you can do that. But it means you can fill up your day. I have 2 hours in the middle of my day that I stop working and I go to the gym and come home and have lunch, and that's just a big break for me, and that's what I like to have. So I start work earlier in the day, finish a little bit later to allow me to have half day Fridays, but I still manage to have 2 hours off where I just have a break, and it just works for me. Um, so it's about finding, you know, whatever when different parts of that job when you do them the best. And if you can manage to work timing wise when you can do those things the best, then that can help kind of ease maybe some of the unbalance.
And yeah, we'll leave this episode here. So we hope that you've enjoyed this more like casual discussion on this topic. If you do like this type of podcast where we're just kind of casually chatting like this, then definitely let us know by either flicking us a comment or on YouTube or on Spotify, or following if you're liking the content. And yeah, we will catch you guys in the next episode. So see you later.
Yeah.